So first of all, thanks to Jimmy and the whole Baroque, Beyond Baroque and pre-Baroque bunch who, first of all, invited me and have made all of this possible. And the lower group are my assistants with whom I would not be able to do my complicated life, and I treasure them immensely. Very talented individuals and very dedicated. So thank you to everybody. I wanted to say something about the meaning of Beyond Baroque to me. I came to move to Venice in '71, and I've been here ever since, although I've been gone probably 3/4 of the time doing work in the world. However, living in Venice is a true privilege, and it is absolutely redolent with culture. In the 4 blocks going east, we have the free, world-renowned concerts at the Lutheran Church, put together by Barbara Schwan, who is here. What a gift. And then we have the Pacific Resident Theater, 3 theaters all in a row with world-class productions. And then next door is Spark, which used to be the original Venice jail. And I was the first person to turn the police war room into a painting studio in the late 80s. And then I had the first exhibitions in the original jail cells with the bars and all. And then it became Spark, Social Public Art Resources Center, where Judy Baca's murals are founded and birthed. And this wonderful place. And when I moved here, Venice was a war zone between the Crips and the Bloods. And look what it has become. It has flourished into the arts in a very unusual, incredible way due to the perseverance and energy of everybody involved in these theaters, dramas, music, literary forms, and the arts in a tiny little area in Venice. There's no place like this in the world, and I can vouch for that as I travel so much. So thank you, everybody who's who gives so much, and I'm very proud to be part of it. Thank you. So what you saw when you came in was part of the original movie Cosmography, The Writing of the Universe. I finished that movie in '95, and I'll talk about it a little bit. But now doing a slideshow, I wanted to do something that was doable in a short time, that gives a sense of the evolution of my ideas, some of my ideas, but I think there's an arc that you will feel. The Cosmography movie deals with one specific arc, and seeing it now for the first time in many years, I'm kind of impressed. It was 5 years of work just in an editing room after 30 years of work running around the world taking pictures of alphabets and cultures and monuments worldwide. And so it's good, at least for me, it's holding up very well. Then I think I'll get started, okay? So, Morah is a Hebrew word that means both terror and revelation. The root is light. Light is or. And or conjugates to become, to see, to mirror, to reflect. And the homonym is a female teacher. The recognition of form in art and healing are all processes, reciprocal and shared. I wanted to say also, I'm going to be showing you a lot of images, and I will be also showing you some text. Don't hold on to any image. Let the images flow through you, kind of like an induction. If there's anything to be read, I will read it to you. Just relax and let all this flow through you. So reflection, connection, and contact are the key ingredients required in both art and healing. A little bit of definition. Art is an array of frequencies of light and color, consciously or unconsciously aligned into form. Form is a vehicle for frequency. Art works much like a laser, often used as a precise medical tool. I was born in Montreal in 1944. I was a questioner from earliest childhood. At 6 years old, I was writing essays that were being published on the question of how come we were at the height of civilization and we still didn't get love, food, and shelter in control. So much starvation, war, suffering in the world. I just couldn't understand it. And my family, my immediate family, my father had a degenerative disease and was an invalid for 13 years. My mother was a famous poet, had borderline what we would call now borderline personality disorder, a very abusive, a very talented individual. The Korean War was going on, and every day I was reading the newspaper, the Montreal Star at the time, and not making sense of the world. I went to a 4-language elementary school, Yiddish, Hebrew, English, and French. At 8, I asked my Torah teacher, how come the names and pronouns of God were both male and female, but we were only to talk about God as a him? And when I asked that in Yiddish, by the way, because you were not allowed to speak the sacred language, my teacher came down the aisle, picked me up by the hair, and threw me out, and I was never allowed back. And that became the beginning of not only my questioning of what was going on in the world, but also why wasn't I allowed to ask a question? So everything I was doing at the time was reinforcing my need to know. Many years later, 99, I made a painting of a very female Torah. And this image, by the way, is the new cover of the international journal called Nashim, which means women in Hebrew. It's coming out any minute at this point. Yep. So at 10 years old, I was stewing in all these questions, and I thought, well, you just go ask the smartest man in the world. And as far as I knew, Albert Einstein was the guy. And so I wrote him a letter and asked him how he could possibly align being the most renowned scientist in the world and believing in the God of the Old Testament, which I had read. And within a week, I received the letter back, much to my mother's surprise. And the key line was and is, try to form your opinions always according to your own judgment. You have shown in your letter that you're able to do so. That line has remained the direction of my life. If I had an idea, I would follow it to the ends of the earth, if necessary. And this is what I've tried to teach all the years that I've been teaching. That's what everyone should be advised to do. If you have an idea, go for it. You are an original creature in this world. And he died less than 2 weeks after that. And I wondered, is it cause and effect? I doubted it, but, there was some, at least in my life, he really gave me the push to follow my ideas. So from early childhood, because life in my family was so difficult, I was sent to a Hebrew-speaking camp. And while the kids were playing kickball, I had brought all these big tomes with me, and I would go off to the forest with my big books and spend a very happy day reading ideas and concocting ideas and thinking about everything around me in new and wonderful ways. And this excited me immensely. And I'd come back to the cabin at the end of the day, and my bunkmates were not quite so kind. They resented me in my difference, and they would pile the week's garbage on my white Hudson Bay blankets, and inside the bed. It was called Frenching the bed. But, I went on off to the woods every day, and that's where I really understood the power of nature and my connection into nature very deeply. So I grew up in Jewish Montreal, a very large enclave, about 100,000 people, and I never knew anyone who wasn't Jewish, but I did know that people who were not Jewish were called Gentiles, and I never met a Gentile. But then at 14, I went to New York for the first time, and there I was in the subway, and this plethora of interesting-looking people of different ethnicities and cultures and languages. I knew I wanted to go there. And that was when I was determined I would leave Montreal. And by the way, the only concept of Chinese or Oriental in Montreal as I was growing up was Chinese food. That was it. There was no idea or inkling that there was a culture attached to the Chinese food. So I wanted to grow up to be a writer and psychologist, and I was writing all these essays, and they were being published, and eventually, and accidentally, I became a multi-hatted artist. An artist is someone, what we see is what we are. The artist aligns frequencies into form and image and causes psychophysiological change. So everything that we see causes a psychophysiological change. You may not yet be aware of it, but it's happening all the time. An artist is a medium between spiritual and material worlds who uses a medium to layer veils of light and shadow to produce illusions, dimension, reflection, refraction, evident in a matrix of frequency. Scientists gather changing information from the material and intellectual worlds to explain the presence of substance by measuring illusions of dimension, reflection, refraction, evident in a matrix of frequency. This morning when I discovered that this talk is being live aired worldwide, I was getting emails from all over the place. I suddenly thought, it won't be long before all information will arrive as a mathematical equation, and then it's up to some AI who's going to translate it into what you need. And it kind of worried me, and I'm still worried about that. So it's a complementary relationship. An artist brings abstraction into form, and a scientist brings form into abstraction. We are exactly opposite to each other. And I wish our education system were a little more amplified, or maybe a great deal amplified, to include these various points of view as information. We need to know everything. I began painting in '68, and I didn't know how to draw. I didn't know how to paint. I sort of arrived in graduate school by a fluke, I'd have to say. And I was immediately painting these, what I called window paintings, of light and lanes over each other, creating space and time. And the second year I decided, I'd like to do what used to be called still life, still is, ordinary objects. But as soon as I set up these vegetables, I began to say, this isn't an ordinary array. What it is, in my mind, in my eye, it was the Exodus from Egypt, and all of these vegetables were marching over to that direction, and everything had become a metaphor. And it was my understanding that whatever I saw had multiple implications, and I could perceive things in many ways. So that was the beginning of yet another phase. And I wanted to bring your attention to apophenia. And last time, the other night, we talked a little bit about creativity on the same spectrum as schizophrenia. And this is the quote. The guy who invented the name of a syndrome called apophenia was a psychiatrist named Conrad in the 50s. And you okay? Oh, good. Good. So Conrad came up with this idea that apophenia is the tendency to mistakenly perceive connections and meaning between unrelated things. And pareidolia is a subcategory of apophenia. Now imagine a world without metaphor. There would be no poetry, no literature, no fiction, no drama, no history, no anything, no creativity. That is the heart. Creativity and metaphor are linked, are married. And without being allowed to have ideas of that the elephant isn't there, well, it kind of looks like that. We would be dead as humans, really. So this is something that I talk about, particularly with the psychiatrists who I teach at McGill University every year. The spectrum between creativity and schizophrenia is one line, and one is very lucky if you've got both feet on the floor, and can still be a very, very creative individual. So 60s and 70s, it was a fantastic time to be alive. All of these new ideas were infiltrating our everyday life, and between Eastern philosophy, quantum physics, Gestalt psychology, personal growth centers, mind-expanding drugs, women's movement, sexual liberation, Black liberation, Vietnam War, there were protests everywhere. It was very exciting to be alive at that time. Not only alive, but to be sentient and conscious and active. And so in that time, I began to understand that I was using everyday foodstuffs as metaphors for the plight of women at that time. And the use of tomatoes and eggs were particularly potent for me. The biology, our biology with eggs, had kept us in the house and not allowing us to expand and develop our creative potential. And it was at that time that I helped to form the first women artist organization called LACWA in Los Angeles. And I give talks all over the world, and it's so heartrending for me to have women come out of the woodwork and talk about the fact that if only they could practice their art, but in their countries and cultures, they're not allowed to. And there's so much work still to do in that domain. So by changing scale and context, this is 6-foot-high fried eggs that are keeping this ripening tomato prisoner. You can see how the metaphor comes in and begins to tell another story. As an art historian, then, I substituted the punch bowl for the Virgin and the peaches for the putti, the little angels that were always flying over medieval art and centralized art. And I also realized that I could take apart certain whole pictures and in that way, create another mood of another time and another place, so that I was able to manipulate time and space and emotion at the same time. And then the big breakthrough came when I imagined that different thicknesses of glass were placed over ordinary foodstuffs, and that would change the time and space. And then I thought, well, I could layer up a bunch of very real-looking things and still wonder which is real. How does that happen? How many realities are there at one time? And something as huge as this, 7 feet by 7 feet, these giant strawberries and flaps of very palpable, juicy fruit were then shown to be nothing, that they would just fly off the canvas plane. So as an artist, I was beginning to, we have some power as artists. Let's see how we can use it. And this painting called Four Square Peeler, I finally understood that I was using the picture plane as a way to look into personality, the layers and layers and layers of personality formed by the culture, formed by our surroundings, and formed by other people's expectations. Around that time, I took my first solo trip in the mountains, and I left on a glorious, warm January day, and I ended up in the mountains in a blizzard, and my van got stuck, and I couldn't move, and I couldn't get out, and I was freezing. And on this third day, I began to walk, knowing that if I stayed in the van, I would freeze in the van. And then the next thing I knew was 3 days later, miraculously, I was found under a snowbank, just about dead, but revived. And this, as you may imagine, was a very important moment in my life, being so close to death and having another chance at life. So this event and understanding the fragility of one breath away from not living required a new form. And so I started to work in circular canvas, and this one was inspired by a dream. And somebody the other day asked whether dreams had any importance in my creative work. Absolutely, yes. This one, I'm standing in front of a motel in Fresno, where I've never been, and I'm standing in front of the basin looking in the mirror, and from my left palm, I begin to pull a tapeworm. And it's fascinating and disgusting. And then I see in the mirror, somebody walks in, a cleaning person, and I ask her if she can help me with this task. And she says, "Oh no, this is something you have to do yourself." And I woke up and I understood that the tapeworm, it can reproduce itself. It has both male and female aspects. And I needed to explore things that I had not explored before. And then the next painting had to do with the serpent. And the serpent is the only creature that lives underground, underwater, in the air, in trees, and has been mythically used as the creature searching for knowledge. Even bundled up searchers could find an occasional moment of rest, but hard to find. So then I decided, well, I'm going to start afresh. I'm going to see if I can find yet more that's hidden inside my personality and my psyche. And I made this painting seeing myself as an orange egg in a cradle with my name in Hebrew. It was called Self-Portrait with Attachments. And then I began to work with 3 Hebrew letters. The Aleph is the red one here, which is the first letter for the word for air, avir. And then the second dark blue is the mem for mayim, water. And the third is the trident, which is the first letter of the word for, go back. This trident is the first letter of the word for srefa, which means fire. So I was working with air, fire, and water. And then I looked into my brain with my right eye, and I found my name is inscribed in pomegranate seeds. Hasya means refuge, and Gila means cosmic joy. And then I looked deeper into DNA, and I suddenly understood that nothing exists alone. Everything must be in relation to something, and that at the lowest level, deepest level, there were always at least 2 that were vitalizing each other. And at the top, I wrote the words Ein Sof, which in Hebrew mean no end, and that means no end to the search. This is the duality of at-one-ment. And in order to perceive the duality of at-one-ment, there had to be a witness, a third. And so the triangle became important, and the 2 poles, and then the third. The triangle is the first complete pattern. And when I painted reflections of events in time, I understood that any crossing of the DNA gives the Hebrew letter Aleph, the first letter in the Hebrew alphabet, the source, the origin, and there it was, right in DNA. I had found a wedding between mysticism and science. I began to feel like I could see through all sorts of tissue and marrow. In 1980, I became paralyzed on the left side of my body. I had 2 canvases made in my size of 5.5 feet tall and 2 feet across, and I had my, whoops, come back. Let's see. No. Eric, any suggestion?
What's up?
We want to go back. Okay, got it. You saved the day, as always. Okay, so these were this size canvas. I had my body penciled in, and then I worked within the first self-portrait on the left one until all of the tangles were gone. And then I worked on the right canvas, again over a self-portrait, to reestablish the surge of the spirit. And at the end of about 8 months, everything was fine and resolved. And by the way, I had received terrible diagnoses of doctors at UCLA and elsewhere, and I was determined that I was going to get into it on my own. Trust intuition as it's found and expressed in body-related imagery. The image seemed to go underwater, and when I say the image seemed to go, I have always followed the image. I'm not someone who knows where anything is going. I'm always following the unknown, chasing that which is the mystery for me. Even in the underwater reeds, I was beginning to find words like the Hebrew word for woman in the reeds. And this was feeling like the fifth day of creation when we're finally at the bottom of the ocean. And where do we go from there? And where we went was that this 6-foot figure began to emerge from the reeds. And that began long durations of wilderness experience starting in 1981. And I found myself at a pond in Southern California, in Temecula, at a artist colony called Dorland Mountain Colony. I spent 3 years at this pond in different times of day and night and season, and had fallen in love, literally, with this pond. I could never get enough of it. And it was always revealing more secrets of itself to me, and I was absolutely hooked. And began to see something peculiar and interesting about the reeds on the other side of the pond. There were seemingly letter forms of some sort, some kind of scriptural message that was being acted out for me. And then I zeroed in and found that there were these 5 forms that were perpetually there for me, writing things. I didn't know the language, but they were there for me. But the more time I spent in the area of the pond, the more I became interested in the reflection rather than that which was reflected. I was an isolated soul. I was flying in an odd emotional psychic state. I was again wondering, where is the reality? Is it the reflection, or is it the stick, or the shadow, or the leaves floating? It was all very mysterious, and even then I could see heaven and earth inside the water, and the only way I could recognize the surface of the pond was by floating leaves, much like human behavior gives us a clue about what's going on between things and on different levels. It wasn't long before I started to look into the land and with the same kind of focus, and I followed the hand of nature and began to isolate what I called anthropomorphic moments in nature, like a shoot growing where it's absolutely dark, even when there's no hope of finding anything. And yet we do that, and that's what keeps us going, that even when there's no light, we look for it. And nakedness, this poor tree had been nibbled all the way down by an elk. And this reminded me of the trials of being naked, sexual attraction, birth, heartbreak. You know, I saw this and I felt my right hand has been torn off. Grief, veiled contact, aging together. In the wind they bend as one, allegory of marriage. Dignity. Spirit in the tree, and learning to fly in the forest. So was this apophenia or creativity? I learned that form evokes feeling, And feeling conjures metaphor, and metaphor demands expression. I began to photograph patches of land that I also painted, just to make sure that I was not fudging anything. It really looked like that. These were the same forms, the 5 forms that I'd seen at the pond. And then I walked around the world looking at forms and natural phenomena all over the place, including the tree of life and forms that denote affection, men, sexuality, animals, and that which is sometimes seen as supernatural. And letter forms. And I was photographing literally worldwide. And here was a Chinese-like form of house. And here it is, roof over person. The letter A. And I began to walk around with this alphabet chart from the earliest form of what's now known as... Who? What do we do? Screen went blank. Okay, thank you. I heard that earlier today there was a power outage here, so that the previous... Okay. Check. So the letter A, and this chart shows the earliest form of what is called Old Hebrew. Now, according to this chart, it only goes back to 1,000 years. Since then, I have found other charts and new discoveries archaeologically that go back 3,500 years. And what was fascinating to me was that the forms that I was finding and photographing in nature were all from the original column, from the first column. And 54 permutations later, the same forms were being used. But for me, the source was the first ones that I found in nature. And so I photographed again all over the world and found these letter forms. And because I read a number of languages, I was able to read in different languages by these same forms. I made 2 books following every single letter of the Hebrew alphabet through its 54 permutations. And I looked into Kabbalah, which has to do with visualization and meditation on the form of every letter of the Hebrew alphabet, alone or in combination, changing not only the psychophysiology of the practitioner, but also believed to change the nature of cosmology in the moment. So whatever you feel is being extended into the world. I began to read the trees and the ground and words, much like a child learning to read. I just looked around me and there were words. And one of the most extraordinary moments in my life, I was in the Rocky Mountains north of Banff, and there on the trail in front of me in roots was the word for letter, made of the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, Aleph, and the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, Taf. It's pronounced Ot. Now imagine, I've spent years looking at and reading alphabets in nature, and there it was in front of me. Moment to remember. And I was very interested in the fact that the last form of the first letter, Aleph, echoes the first form of the last letter, Taf. They look the same, much like DNA. This is the first photo of DNA by Rosalind Franklin in 1952. Although she worked with Watson and Crick, she didn't get the credit she deserved. So I walked around the world looking at alphabets, photographing them, and wondering why were all alphabets universally based on the same 5 forms. And one day in Venice Beach, a walk along the ocean, I got it. And it was that the forms that we recognize mirror the neurons and neural processes with which we perceive them, a mirroring relationship. I suppose that as our ancestors ubiquitously searched for food or foe, certain forms leaped out at them, those reflecting the hardwired neurons and neural processes of perception and cognition. Reciprocal relationship between observer and observed, perceiver and perceived, each is changed by the other. So I began doing a lot of brain research. And in 1982, I was invited to present my new idea to 100 scientists at a conference in Kansas called Council Grove. And I presented my idea about the 5 forms, which I called alphabetic morphology. And then I was invited to present this work at conferences all over the world, and I was carrying 4 slide projectors, and you may remember that that was kind of arduous. So Eric Marin then agreed to make a movie of this process with me, and we sat in the editing room for 5 years, and his patience and skill and creativity, I'll always be grateful for that. And so the first movie, which you just saw some of, was finished in 95. And in 19, I was invited to create a movie for children of all ages or people of all ages that extrapolated the main idea of cosmography. And another 3 years in the editing room and reading the landscape emerged, and it's now also all over the world. So recognition of and by familiar form is a reflective process that is life-affirming. And I continue to be perplexed. Do we see because of how we think, or do we think because of how we see? We universally recognize external forms in the same way because they reflect our hardwired perceptual apparatus, but we give meaning to form in cultural context. In 86, 87, I traveled in 15 Asian countries. The whole world of Oriental finally was demystified, and I was studying alphabets, languages, cultures, medicine, shamanism, and found that the 2 letters, T and C, were the main letters between our medical system and an Eastern medical system. So meditation plus visualization became medication in the East. This was a big new news for me. And I also learned belief systems are random, contextual, and convenient. Joy is culturally determined. Grief is experienced universally in the same way. Joy is dictated by cultural preference. So one culture wants many husbands, another wants many wives, one wants sons, or the other one wants daughters. Sexual preference changes, and the gods change every 5 kilometers. But grief is experienced universally in the same way, with loss of contact, rejection, and abandonment. So while cultures vary widely, we are fundamentally more alike than we are different. And this learning was essential in my own growth. In the East, secular is sacred. In the West, power of imagery only recognized as erotic form that changes psychophysiology. But all things that we see, conscious interactive seeing, changes our psychophysiology. And with that comes the emission of neurotransmitters, endorphins, serotonin, and we change our physiology. In Tibet, the erotic image signifies a union of wisdom and compassion, and establishes balance. And the medicine deity is blue, and I have a feeling that the blueness is to alleviate inflammation. And you'll see soon that all of the Tibetan practices are based on actual knowledge of the body. The Hopis ask their ill people to lie on a painting on the sand, and this image is going to heal them, and they do. The Navajo have a similar system of healing paintings on the sand. And of course, the people who are ill believe that this is happening to them, that there's a purpose in these images. In Bali, if one is ill, one is sent to see a sacred dancer, and just by seeing that dancer, the physiology of the viewer is changed.
But
Similarly, in Bhutan, and I have the word treadmill there because a few years ago I learned that simply imagining yourself on a treadmill is going to reduce calories. The only difference is you got to keep at it, but just seeing it is going to change your body. So once you have that idea that seeing changes your body, there's a lot of room to grow. Seeing special dancers in certain African cultures, just looking at it, you get energized. Seeing people who you believe have power of one form or another will also cause a change in your psychophysiology, as does seeing something that you believe is beautiful. That will also change you. Architecture that has lasted throughout the centuries and eons always has this body form encased in it. And it doesn't matter which culture, whether it's Western, Eastern, or in between, the arch always gives a sense of comfort. From 89 to 90, I lived alone in a high mountain forest in northern Arizona. I started out in a yurt and had left all the comforts of home, and I became the deer. My two last names both mean deer in Polish and in German. And I was alone, living with the big animals. We got to know each other really well. The forest became my cathedral. I was reading the alphabet in the trees. I was very much alone, so alone that when the greatest forest fire ever recorded in Arizona hit and burnt everything, I was the only one standing, and the chiggers of tiny insects invaded my eyes and drank the liquid from my eyes, and I became blind for a period of time. In the winter, I moved into a shack that had been abandoned many years prior, and I had to collect snow for water. There was no power, no water, or electricity power. And I had a visitor, a baby bobcat, who came and introduced himself, and he slept in my hair at night, and in the day he would go out and hunt. He became about 4 times that size. And my paintings seemed to go into the subconscious. And these were images I'd never seen before, but that they came about in that environment of being utterly alone and in a nature state. I felt very at one with nature. And in the spring, I walked with bears. They knew me and I knew them, and we would just pass each other on the trail. They were just emerging from hibernation. What an incredible feeling to feel that we can share our space, our nature, with another species. I learned that we are herding animals. It's only within our herd that we can be heard. We look for the spaces between, look for reflection. Look at this individual, only one in all these hundreds of people, and he is distinguished by his red hat. The Kabbalah says that Adam was created as the shadow of the reflection of the substance. By this time, 10 months in, I felt that I had reached what I had come for. I was a tabula rasa. I felt at equilibrium in every way. And I realized that one of the floorboards had lifted in the frost, and there was a gas leak in the cabin, and I had totally enveloped the cabin with visqueen, so there was no air coming in, and it was about 28 degrees all the time, day and night. And so I felt that it was an okay time to die, and I got fully dressed, got into a sleeping bag, and decided that I was going to die from the gas. And I dreamed that the man who found me so miraculously way back in 74 under the snowbank was in my dream, and he was saying, "You will get through this one too in the snow, Gila." And I woke up and I realized that I dreamed a dream. These are my words, that my will to live was far greater than my will to die. And the burden of living became a gift, changed my life. At that moment, just about a week later, I received an invitation from the Dalai Lama in India to come to India and be present for the first time ever that any Dalai Lama had taught the bodhicitta, the compassion, meditation, and practice. I left my snow-covered mountaintop. I went to the other snow-covered mountaintop and sat with 300 monks in the cold. And we were taught to imagine these white spheres called tile of vital essences, which are of two types, absolute and relative. And we were instructed to imagine this white sphere coming down one side of the body, nourishing every cell, system, and organ. Oh no, come back. What? Yes, sorry. Temperamental, these electrical things. So imagine this white sphere, which is compassion, and it's coming down first one side of your body, nourishing cells, systems, and organs, and then over to the other side and nourishing cells, systems, and organs, and ultimately the white sphere goes out into the universe to nourish all sentient beings. Quite a concept. Have the intention of doing the practice for the sake of the liberation of all beings. Tantric mystic physiology of the subtle body is directly related to the somatic physiology of regular medicine, and tantric practices of manipulating it bear directly on tantric teaching, a healing. This visualization practice nourishes the body, speech, and mind. When you feel better, you are kinder and feel greater compassion to others. You become other-directed, right action. Form, perspective, thought, belief, behavior, change, psychophysiology. I had already determined that recognition is proprioceptive, hardwired into physiological systems. Therefore, the paradigmatic model of contact and communication must lie submerged in our deeper resources. I began to study cell behavior, a discernible unit of life that tends to live in groups as do animals and humans. I learned that cells whisper together through cell membranes that vibrate in the electromagnetic field called a soliton, and that calcium is essential for cell whispering. I show you now here's a group of cells. Here's the soliton that they have to cross in order to communicate. When calcium is introduced, they get together and have a party. No calcium means that they can't communicate, and so they clone themselves, and this is what we call cancer. Similarly, in psychology and psychiatry, in isolation, we may develop psychopathology. We may mirror ourselves and become narcissists. We become physically isolated and talk to ourselves. We become emotionally isolated, and we may form multiple personalities. Much like our hardwired physiological systems, our search from birth is for a resonating, symmetrical reflection, not a clone. Micro to macro, all healthy organisms require reflection and communication. Particles, cells, individuals, communities, nations, galaxies, all require connections to be viable. From infancy, we model behavior with mirror neurons. Reflection, connection, contact, exactly similar, but not identical. We need that difference in order to evoke life. So back to the mystery of those white spheres. In the late 90s, I began a series called Temple of Mind, and these little white spheres seem to appear out of nowhere as if cells. I didn't understand the nature of these images, but I just kept following the leader. And these images arrived, and surprising to me, all had these white spheres. And I wondered whether there were bodhicitta spheres, or there were worlds within worlds, or what were they? Yeah. And I recalled the tantric teachings. I conjectured that when the Tibetan tantric healing visualizations were conceived, calcium had been combined with bodhicitta at either the conscious or unconscious level. I'd already been on the Tibetan plateau. The Himalayas are the baby mountains in the world, the most recently under the sea. High mollusk calcium content in the meager vegetation at the top of the world. Tibetans eat only high protein, high calcium diet, yak, meat, cheese, and milk, and are very healthy. I sent my new idea to Nawangdon Dupnarkid, who is the official biographer of the Dalai Lama, and he sent it to Geshe Gyaltsen, who was the authority on the origin of all Buddhist practice. And he wrote to me, there are two types of bodhicitta. First is the mind, the consciousness, the real bodhicitta, and the second is the physical white bodhicitta, the calcium and the mind bodhicitta are connected because both are related with elements of the body. Because they help support the health or well-being of the individual, leading to great compassion, the mind aspiring to great enlightenment in order to benefit all sentient beings. So the initiation of that practice had to do with gathering the calcium and the belief system of beneficial right action into one unit, as all of the practices have been developed to do. So 1997 to 2000, I started another series called the Diamond Series. And again here, there were these spheres. And then I had a very terrible accident. I went to Queen Charlotte Island, which is 200 miles in the Pacific west of Victoria or Vancouver. And I went there because I was researching the life and work of Emily Carr, the first woman artist in Canada to be recognized as an artist and as a writer. She was a writer before she was an artist. And she did spend a lot of time with the different Indian tribes on Queen Charlotte Island, the Kwakiutl and the Haida, and she learned their languages, and she wrote about their customs and their stories and their histories, and painted their log houses as well. I was fascinated with Emily Carr. There had been one image over my crib when I was a baby, alongside with one of Vincent van Gogh, and those were the two influences as a child. So the difference in the voyage, my ship voyage from Victoria to Queen Charlotte Island, the ocean was raging as it had, because I was reading her diary from 1915, and she's writing exactly what it felt like. But the difference was that the entire ship was hung with Emily Carr paintings. And this was a big moment to see that a woman who had not been recognized until her 70s is now the most popular woman artist in Canada. So on the last day there, I was taking my rented car back to the hotel, and I was on a very remote road. And suddenly my steering wheel took off to the right, and the car began rolling down into a ravine, and I was left at the bottom of the ravine, crushed, hanging in this car that was not visible from the road. It was a very deep road, a deep ravine, but as luck would have it, there was a car that preceded me on this remote road, and it was being driven by someone who was a nurse. And so, by her habit, she had seen a car, and then she didn't see the car, and she came back and saw the car at the bottom of the ravine. And so there was nothing she could do. It was way down. It was too dangerous. But she drove for 3 hours to get to the EMTs of the Haida Gwaii. And they came 3 hours later, and they climbed down into the ravine, and they saw what they thought was a dead body in that car. I began to come into consciousness, and as soon as I did, I imagined blue ice all over my body, knowing I had to limit inflammation as much as I could. And at this moment, I hear from the Haida and Kwakiutl with their masks, and they had just received the Jaws of Life the week before with a Japanese manual, which was of no use to them. And I hear one said to the other, "How the fuck you get this thing to work?" So I knew I was home, right? Home on the planet. Things don't work. We need the manual. But what they did, according to their culture, which is a whale culture, they stripped off the clothes of my body and managed to cover it all with whale blubber. And in that way, they managed to extract me from the wreck. Gave me immediate morphine when they understood that I was alive, much to their amazement. Drove the 3 hours back to the infirmary, which at that moment only consisted of a room about 10 by 12 with no instrumentation whatsoever, not even x-rays, and just kept feeding me morphine, knowing that I was badly hurt. On the 5th day, I decided I've got to leave, and so morphine to go. I had to walk from that island to another island, and then to Prop Jet Island, and finally to Vancouver, and got on a plane, arrived in LA, went to St. John's, and I went immediately to my doctor at St. John's, barely being able to make it, and he said, "You're the walking dead." And they immediately put me in a live MRI, and that's one where you actually see all the functions of your body moving around you. And when I saw that, I had such compassion over all the elements of my body that had been so broken, so damaged. And it was a real sense of my soul taking extreme care, needing to have that care of this poor body that was so damaged. I was told that I'd probably die. I would for sure lose my mind. I would lose all mobility, and I had broken just about everything you can break. The 3 vertebrae, almost all the ribs, sternum, scapula on both sides, hands, knees, head. My heart EKG was that of a dead person, and there were 5 millimeters of bone fragments in my spinal column. But I decided, I never had surgery, I decided I would go home, and I couldn't move, and do meticulous visualization with medical texts of every cell, system, and organ, rebuilding from the inside out. And that's what I did all day long. Medical texts in front of me, and lying down and studying every cell, and bringing it visually to its optimal condition. And after 2 months, I began to paint, and I was able to walk up the stairs to my studio. And I had these enormous diamond shapes made, canvases, and I was determined I was going to reconstruct my body from the inside out. And so you can see in this one, which was the first one, the spinal column and the ribs and other areas of the body and the DNA. And I would write into every painting because I understood that the more faculties one uses to increase the power of visualization, the stronger it is and the more effect it has. So in this one I wrote, in Hebrew, mi yachya v'mi yamut, who will live and who will die, which is what one says at the beginning of the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah, not knowing whether you'll survive another year. And here were these same spheres that emerged. And then I began to see that they, not only were they in this painting, but I began to find them located in other cultures as being significant points. So there were acupuncture points and moxibustion points and meridian points and morphogens and lymphatic system points. And then I felt that I had to make a facsimile of open heart surgery in order to get to the 5 millimeters of bone fragments that were lodged in my spinal column. And I painted my name around the spinal column, Khasya, which means refuge. And after some months, those bits of bone managed to get attached to the neighboring bones, and there was no longer a problem. And when I grew stronger, and I could feel the strength in my heart here, and I was strong enough that I could once again look at the outside world, at the beauty of nature, this was definitely a point of understanding that I had reached a worthy point, and I would be well. All the time, I was full of gratitude for having survived and that I would survive, and painted that word into this canvas. And the Hebrew word or means both sacred light and sacred skin. And as a painter, that's what I felt I was doing, making skins of light over each other, and that way creating new lives. I understood fully that everything is entirely interconnected, and I had to be aware of anything I did because the repercussions exist at all levels. And so I learned that divinity is in humanity and spirituality is in behavior. Wisdom requires understanding the consequence of behavior. Change the meme and change the gene. This was a tremendous understanding that if the behavior changes often enough, and probably in 2 or 3 generations, the gene will also change. So we have control over our future in that very secret way, but it shouldn't be a secret. With each breath, we have a choice whether to take another breath, live in this world that is full of tribulation and terror and worry, or leave it and go through the door into another realm. My feeling is I want to be here and be active in changing what I can change. Our big brains are always looking for more knowledge. We have been looking for the Grail for centuries and eons, almost recognizing it, but it's very elusive. Similarly, we look at ancient texts and think that we can decipher these messages, but when we get up close, we can't. They're beyond our knowledge at this moment. We look into hermeneutic texts like the Zohar, and here we see the word for Zohar. The same word, when pronounced Zahir, means beware, pay attention, don't go there. And the other way of pronouncing Zohar means splendor. So one is enticed and attractive, but be careful. We look for clarity, and we look through every door that we can find to see what can be revealed. We go to architectures of learning, universities, institutions, hoping that we'll get that incredible bump that's going to say, you've got it, you have the whole knowledge right now. And we sit in contemplation in sacred spaces, hoping that in this way we would gain deeper knowledge, but we see a reflection of ourselves looking back at us. We have to do the work ourselves. And we understand that in the interconnection of all things, this word in Hebrew is shamayim, and in shamayim we have the word for water, mayim, all linked together. We humans begin to imagine other dimensions and alternative universes, and we're perpetually hoping that a message will arrive that will be comprehensible and will give us what we need to be better human beings. But we continue to search. As long as we realize that we're very interconnected at all levels, that we are riding bareback on each other's souls, we will go forward. We are all in search of the light. And the better we understand the nature of reflection, the better we will be able to recognize each other. We are all unique, although seemingly similar, but each of us is special. We become the archaeology of the future. And as we waft through our moment in time, we may collect further wounds, but we heal and are better equipped to go into the next stage and to find each other once again in light. Thank you. Now, I don't know whether there are any questions or discussion. If there is, I'd be happy to take a stab at it. Seems too hard a word, stab, after this, right? Hi. Oh, hi. Hi.
I just recently learned that Leonardo da Vinci applied coding is.
Yes.
And I'm curious to get a little more insight into how your process and what your practice process is about putting coding in your work in order.
Well, it's very good. It is very unconscious and then very conscious.
Could you go on the microphone?
Yes, sorry. It's both conscious and unconscious. I will start not knowing where I'm going to go on any piece, and then whatever occurs, I will begin to follow stroke by stroke. And so the many months of every canvas is a very intense search for what is going to be revealed at the end of all those months, and that's what keeps me interested. I think, I don't know, I'm not an expert on Leonardo, although I have to confess that if I were to invite two gentlemen to dinner, one would be Leonardo and the other one would be Thomas Jefferson. Sort of the mind and the body, something like that. And that's what I'm interested in. All the words that remain legible are there for a purpose. They have meaning. They also give structure. And every letter gives structure to the composition. So it's all very consciously organized, but only when I look at it in retrospect. So for me, the important thing is follow the clues, follow the lead, and see what happens. Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit more about calcium?
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, once I get into something, I really go for it, and I do a self-motivated course in whatever I need to find out, and that's what I learned about calcium, and went to the Lowenthal, who wrote all the information about it, gathered all the data as the authority, and it became clear from studying calcium that it is essential for cells to communicate. And that too was a revelation. And as I was working with different imagery that was evolving in my paintings, and these spheres kept appearing, and then as I was understanding the importance of calcium to facilitate communication between cells, I took more notice about that and how to integrate it into my life in a more physical way, in a more normal physical way. So using both the imagery and also the printed science that I was collecting. I'm always collecting information about everything. I really feel the need to know everything I can possibly ever know in my lifetime. And so my fields of interest keep increasing everywhere, and because I spend a lot of time in other countries and cultures, I learn a great deal about different belief systems and different medical systems. So I don't know if that answers your question about calcium, but I know you need it. Yeah.
It's that there's a connection between the white spheres and the calcium.
Yes, and this is what I suggested to my Tibetan friends. Surely there must have been some connection, some knowledge that was being these two practices were being connected at the same time. And I've learned a lot about Tibetan practice over. It's now about 45 years that I've been privy to very deep understanding and learning. And nothing is random in any of those practices. They all have specific intent to make the practitioner feel better, so that as they feel better, they will be more compassionate to the next person. So nothing is for the sole purpose of yourself. Everything is to be transferred to more people.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'd like to link three things together from your presentation that to me stand inevitable and prophetic. And the first one is when you were a child and you were trying to find out why was there hunger, why was there, you're trying to understand the suffering of the world. Right? And the second is when we're with the Tibetans and you show the triangle of compassion moving through the body and
The sphere, yeah.
sphere and creating healing as it went all the way through, moving it around. And the third one had to do with what you said about the mean can change the gene.
Yeah.
So, are you answering your childhood question when you say that?
Oh, what an interesting perspective. I don't know that I'll ever be able to answer anything definitively. I can only say that I'm constantly looking, and I'm constantly looking at other cultures to see what else I can find that will elucidate more on all of these issues. As it happens, I'm currently engaged and involved in a new institute that I helped form at the medical school, University of Colorado in Denver, and the intent is indigenous and traditional medicine, and we are gathering information from early cultures, what we used to call early cultures, but continuing cultures, healthy cultures who have an entirely different worldview and different practices. And these are the kinds of information that are very important to me at this time. And we're having conferences and webinars and bringing in shamans, etc. Speaking about shamans, I have for many years regarded artists as shamans because we change the worldview and the psychophysiology of the viewer. That is, in some cultures, considered magic. But really, it is a question of understanding the potency of introducing another image that can be absorbed in the body. And this is a very powerful way of dealing with medical issues. And even in places as traditional as St. John's and other hospitals all around the world, they're using visualization practice before every surgery and during the surgery and after the surgery, and finding that the participation of the patient produces a very strong positive affect. So to answer, if I may, your question, I am always looking for how else we can expedite the individual to participate in their own healing. It's a very strong component of what I would call new medicine. It's bringing in the old medicine, making the allopathic medicine new again.
So just one more corollary question to that, because in the medical establishment today, so much has to do with chemical or surgery.
Yeah.
It seems like we've gone off the deep, almost like the projection of what's happening with AI. It's things that are very useful and that can be extremely helpful. in curing people or helping people, and at the same time take us to another place where we're not in control and we're not the masters of our own destiny. So it's kind of, what you bring together is those two things, and we can see through your art how the art expresses that, but it seems that in real life, it's not happening that way, and that we have to fight to get it to where we can be our healers again. And I just wonder how.
Well, and you're perfectly right. We're falling off the edge into technology. But may I give you a couple of examples of ways in which art is used in healing ways. The example I gave of when I was paralyzed on the left side and how I worked within my body image has grown into a practice worldwide. And I have worked with children and adults with cancer in Nairobi, in the hospital in Nairobi. I've worked with them here in Los Angeles. And these were cancer patients. And I have them penciled in against a wall on a 6-foot piece of paper, and we sit around and we look at medical texts, and where is your problem? Is it the blood? Well, here is what the blood looks like. Is it your heart? Is it your ovaries? Whatever it is, we isolate and focus on the problem, and then they are asked to recreate or create a whole new body, looking at the medical text with the optimal state of each of the problem areas. This is a very powerful exercise, and we call it body mapping, and it's being used in hospitals worldwide at this point. The participation of the individual, the visualization of the individual to the perfect state is a strong and powerful means to get to a positive end, and it is with your own body, your own hand, that you're making the difference. The opposite of what you were describing as surgery in some other room when everybody's asleep kind of thing. So we're trying more and more to get this kind of participatory medicine engaged in modern, so-called modern medicine. And I've done quite a lot of this, and I also instruct physicians all over the world how to do it and do it with them. And the data collected from all of these events is absolutely surprising. I would not say surprising, I would say guaranteed that there is healing that takes place. And the other thing is that people really feel useful in participating in their own recovery and healing. I also teach, as I mentioned, psychiatrists in Montreal, McGill, every year. And trying to tie together the psychophysiological aspects of treatment with just the mental treatment of illness. And that's also really important. A lot of work to do. It's not that obscure. We need to go to the original sources, bring those sources back into the super modern, and temper it. I have another lecture that I give on how to do this with different populations, and it's very effective. Would love to share it, but could only do so much in this time.
Oh, sorry. Can you suggest like a starter kit of sorts for body mapping?
Well, I have a protocol on my website. If you write to me, I'll send you the protocol. Yeah, that would be a starter kit.
Where's the website?
Gila.com. Yeah.
I'm never been involved in the visual arts itself. I would often think about it. How visual art and theater what could change healing after that I do need ideas about this too. How do you do that?
Well, this is your question.
It's just how can artists help heal? What are our tools that we can use?
Imaging is the number one tool, but your question takes me back a long time when I spent a day with Bruno Bettelheim, and he was asked at the end of the day, how, with your renown, your reputation, your ability to change people, why is it that you haven't been able to change more people? And he said, give me 100 people, I'm lost. Give me 10, I'm lost. Give me one person, I can change them. And I really have taken that to heart all these years, that we don't change things en masse. I think the opposite occurs, actually. When there's too much mass, it becomes not recognized. But on one-to-one, small groups, participatory activities, action, things can change. And as an artist, you have tremendous ability to change the vision of anyone who looks at your art. It was like in founding the Women's Artists Organization in 72, everybody thought it was useless, just a drop in a bucket, nothing will ever change. We had counted all the paintings in LACMA, and there were none by women. And so we began doing research. Turned out that all the paintings that were called anonymous were done by the wives, mistresses, sisters, lovers of all the famous males. And that really opened up another avenue of research, which became a history of women artists. And many of the women artists are connected into nature by our bodies. We are much more aware of the cycles of nature. And many women artists create images that are particularly fecund, very affiliated with being part of nature. One of the other things that I took on at that time was looking at all art reviews of male and female artists, and the words that were used for women artists were deemed derogatory. They all had to do with softness, curves, emotion, soft colors, and natural kind of phenomena. And the male, which were all promoted and very much lauded, were strong, straight, angular, etc., etc., and those were the words that were deemed correct to become famous in the art world. Well, things have changed, thankfully, over these years. And by the way, there are a number of eco-centered arts organizations that I can send you the names of if you want to become part of that movement too.
Awesome.
Yes.
Are you available to teach lighting to
Yes.
what on the minute?
Yes. My reason to live after that, several occasions, is to teach what I know, keep gaining information and give it away. That's why we have life, I believe, is learn as much as you can that's useful and give it away, because there's always going to be more information coming and we have to be open enough to gather it and use it. Yes.
I suspect that performing through the order, literally teaching it, that they're having done it. They're having done that moving body that we did, or it's actually that I see it as a procedure page. You're helping work with every cell like that, creates that capacity to our colonists. And so aside from literally showing us how to do it, your ambient time opens up, instead of electricity, up that to like subtle legend. It reminds me of when worms that Mira Alfosa, the mother shared Washa, did yourself. Work cells. And personality. It's like you're having action like that capacity with it, our own body, and materialize or any.
Well, thank you.
The way things are opening for all of us,
one of the most gratifying aspects of my life is that my work is invited to travel pretty much all over the world. And wherever it goes, different culture, different language, different religion, different everything, people stand in front of those pieces and weep. Something opens in them. And the most astonishing was in Berlin when the curator told me that a busload of Catholic priests came to see the paintings, and they never go to see art, but they came for this. And they all stood and they all opened up. That was very astonishing for me and also gratifying. Similarly, I had a large show of 30 paintings that traveled in Europe for 7 years, 7 countries, and in the last exhibition, when that closed in Moscow, the entire show was stolen. And that's another story. But the good part of that is that they wanted it so much that they took it. So, and my goal is, when I paint, I'm painting, looking at this, whatever it is, as it's reflecting my body. So I'm always in relation to the body. And it is serving a purpose for my own health as well as whoever may see it. Yes.
But I just want to say how profoundly moving I found your work. She's worked tremendously rich body of work, and that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
And so have you ever contemplated the idea that you began painting windows, doorways, windows of perception?
Right.
And it led into something altogether different, just nothing I'd ever seen. And you no longer needed to do that. You had entered that doorway of perception. And certainly moved me.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very grateful that you are affected by it positively. And as far as those doorways, it's never finished. Because every time I open my eyes, I learn something new. And that means I'm going to reestablish the order that already exists because it needs to accommodate new understanding, new learning. I'm addicted to learning. And every time I learn something, it opens up a new vista. So that's why I work in series, because one idea will spawn a certain number of works, and then that will come to an end, and meanwhile there's another idea that's evolving that's going to move into another series. Like the paintings that are here in the Radiance show, they all were spawned by my residency in a very remote forest area in Northern California. And, I look at them now and I think, who was that person who painted those things? And that's how it feels whenever I look at another body of my work. Where did it come from? It came from the circumstances of the time. And so in that way, I'm always seeing things differently. Should we have one more and go have tea?
Yeah. I've been a big fan of actually the fashion. So we make this so many years ago in Nairobi. And I had you say something today about what the AI, how it is affecting natural art. I'm also a performer, I'm a musician, and I think also according to my research that I know that also right now in the wild, in the medical, in the wild, they are healing people with frequencies. Mm-hmm. Just like you say, people I read something about that doctors, for example, is using hives.
Yeah.
Because of the basics, the beats, natural. It is still in a healing vibration by nature.
Yes.
So people like chronic pains, he puts them on a bed, and underneath the bed there is a beehive. So where you can only get the vibration on these things. And so, there are all these things that also made me feel, I think. And so there is that aspect which they are using energy, like vibrational energy,
sound and directly to heal, for example, chronic pain is to bring relief. So, and I saw that also as I love natural instruments and natural sound, and I see AI as really gotten into also the creative world of sound. And the AI sound is not as natural as, for example, a drum made from a natural raw skin hide from a cow. So what would be your advice to maybe future artists? How do you think you can handle this advent of the AI so that you also will not use our touch and relate?
Thank you, Neko. Absolutely, there is so much healing power in music, and that's now used profoundly and very widely in terms of providing the frequencies that are necessary for specific problems to heal. But in that vein, I think I'd like to share one of the great experiences of my life, which dealt with exactly that. In 2006, I went to the North Pole to study the language of the Eskimos for my Reading the Landscape film. And at night, I lay on the tundra in this freezing universe, and literally I was on the very top. And as I lay there, and it was dark, the greatest Northern Lights exposure ever was covering the entire I was going to say foundation. I was thinking foundation in terms of how high the sky is. But this was an incredible array of every color and different swirls and different ribbons of color crossing and enriching each other, and also coming right down to where I lay there on the turf. And when I listened, each color became a sound of the frequency. And so there was a cosmic symphony happening at the same time as the cosmic light show. Never again did I have that, but I will always remember that, and that is all natural. So as far as AI duplicating, it's impossible. It can come close, maybe, but it is not in any way the same as being enveloped in cosmic light and cosmic sound.
Well, with the sounds,
It sounded like Bartok on drugs. It was this huge symphony, and all of these different sounds that were coming across. It was extraordinary. Yeah.
The sound is the effect of what?
That's the frequency. The frequency of red, for example, the color red, will have a sound equivalent of red. So in all of these colors and the swirling colors, as they cross each other, you have crossing of frequencies, which give this symphonic arrangement.
That's interesting. You bring to mind that conversation I had with Michelle. You love Michelle.
Yeah.
A blind friend who I was with, a fellow musician enough. And one time we were speaking about colors and sound. Just from the break, that's what also, because it was what we like when we were like around age, maybe, and if you had, when we talked, this like, so I tried to ask him this area, my voice, what do you think of it in terms of a color? Thinking that the current state he has no teacher. So I'm just trying to talk that, yeah, and it's interesting that so sound actually has frequency.
Absolutely, and you can measure the frequency both of sound and color. And there was a time when I thought it would be really fascinating to take a work of art and measure the frequencies of the color coming forward, and then replicate it in sound. So that's another thing on my list to do. But this also brings up the issue that as an artist, you need to be very cogent about the images or the sounds that you produce, because everything that you produce will have a very strong effect, even if they don't know it, on the hearer or the viewer. And that is a responsibility that, unfortunately, too many artists don't understand that they have. And my feeling is, don't let anything out of the studio unless it has a salutary effect. And, some may say that that is far too controlling, but that is my key in life, is not to make it worse for anyone.
One of the parts and food. Thank you.
Thank you for your attention, and I'm available. And as I said, whatever I have, I would like to give away. So, thanks.